In the dusty corners of Arizona Territory, 1878, a desperate woman named Clara Matthews fled into unforgiving wilderness with nothing but the torn dress on her back and terror in her heart. Her father's rage had finally crossed the line from threats to attempted murder. The cave she discovered, cold, dark, and unyielding, became both sanctuary and prison as hunger and thirst slowly claimed what remained of her strength. On the fourth day, when hope had all but vanished, a shadow appeared at the entrance. Running Wolf had wandered these mountains alone for years, shunned by both worlds that claimed him. Why would this solitary Apache, carrying his own painful history, choose to help a white woman who represented everything he had learned to distrust? Would this unlikely meeting heal two broken souls or lead to their final undoing? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silver flask caught the moonlight as it shattered against the wall, inches from Clara's head. Whiskey splashed across the rough-hewn boards, its sharp scent mixing with the metallic tang of blood already seeping from the cut above her eye. "You're just like her," Thomas Matthews slurred, fumbling for his hunting knife on the table. "Think you're too good for this place? Too good for your own father?" Clara pressed herself against the corner, feeling the familiar cold dread wash over her. But tonight was different. In her father's bloodshot eyes lurked something new, a vacancy that made her blood run cold. "Pa, please." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You're drunk. Let's talk in the morning." His laugh held no humor as he advanced, knife now gleaming in his hand. "There ain't gonna be a morning for you, girl. Should have done this years ago after your ma died." When he lunged, Clara's body moved on instinct. She raised her arm to block the blade, feeling white-hot pain as it sliced through her sleeve into flesh. Her scream seemed to come from somewhere outside herself as she ducked beneath his arm and bolted for the window. Glass shattered around her as she crashed through, her father's roar following her into the night. The ground rushed up, driving the air from her lungs, but fear propelled her forward. Blood trickled warm down her arm as she ran blindly into the darkness. The small town of Copper Creek slumbered under a blanket of pre-dawn stillness. Clara darted between buildings, her bare feet finding every sharp stone. She could seek help. Sheriff Watson lived at the edge of town, but memories stopped her cold. The same sheriff who'd returned her to her father twice before, who'd shared whiskey with him while explaining that family matters stay in the family. The eastern sky was lightening to gray when she reached the edge of town. Ahead lay wilderness, miles of untamed country stretching toward the mountains. Behind her, the first doors were opening as Copper Creek stirred to life. Someone would see her soon, report back to her father. Clara touched the wound on her arm, wincing at the flare of pain. The cut wasn't deep, but fear of infection nagged at her. Still, better to die of fever in freedom than by her father's hand in that suffocating cabin. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing in the shadow of a towering juniper. The sun now climbed above the horizon, revealing the harsh landscape she'd entered. Red rocks and scrub brush stretched in every direction, beautiful and unforgiving. No water in sight, no shelter but the meager shade of the juniper. Clara tore a strip from her petticoat to bind her wounded arm, teeth clenched against the pain. The white fabric quickly bloomed with red, and she found herself staring at it, thoughts scattered like dry leaves in wind. Her mother would have known what to do. Ellen Matthews had been like steel wrapped in silk, gentle with Clara but strong enough to weather Thomas's dark moods, until the fever took her 3 winters ago, leaving 16-year-old Clara alone with a man whose grief had calcified into rage. As the day wore on, hunger gnawed at her stomach and thirst scratched her throat. She'd fled with nothing, no water, no food, not even proper shoes. The realization brought a bubble of hysterical laughter. She might have escaped her father only to die from her own foolishness. When shadows lengthened, Clara forced herself to move again. She'd heard travelers speak of water sources in these hills. Finding one before nightfall might mean survival. The last light painted the landscape in shades of fire as she stumbled forward. Each step sent shards of pain through her feet, now cut and blistered. The wound on her arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Exhaustion dragged at her like weights, yet beneath the pain and fear flickered something unexpected, a fragile sense of possibility. For the first time in 3 years, no one knew where she was. No one waited to criticize, to threaten, to control. Whatever dangers this wilderness held, at least they were not her father's hands around her throat. Night fell, bringing bitter cold that seeped into her bones. Huddled beneath the inadequate shelter of another juniper, Clara wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Distant coyote calls reminded her she wasn't alone in this vastness, though whether that was comforting or terrifying, she couldn't decide. As stars wheeled overhead, Clara's thoughts returned to the silver flask, her father's constant companion. How many times had she watched it disappear into his pocket before the shouting began? How many bruises could she trace back to its gleaming surface? "I won't die out here," she whispered to the indifferent stars, her voice cracked with thirst but resolved. I won't give him the satisfaction. Morning would bring new challenges, but as Clara drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought sustained her. Each painful step carried her farther from the man who'd tried to kill her, and closer to something that, even in her exhaustion, felt remarkably like freedom. Dawn broke harsh and unforgiving. Clara's parched tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth as she forced her battered body to move. The small wooden cross around her neck, her mother's final gift, pressed against her collarbone, its familiar weight both comfort and burden. Her second day in the wilderness proved more brutal than the first. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the world into a shimmering haze. Each step became a negotiation between will and weakness. The cut on her arm had stopped bleeding but felt hot, angry. "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible even to herself. Please God, water. By midday, Clara's vision blurred at the edges. Twice she stumbled to her knees, each time taking longer to rise. The third time, she stayed down, drawing ragged breaths as tears carved clean tracks through the dust on her face. "I can't," she murmured, fingers finding the small cross. "Mama, I can't." A distant hawk's cry drew her gaze upward. The bird circled lazily above a ridgeline to the north. With no better direction, Clara used the last of her strength to stagger toward it. The ridge rose steep and unforgiving before her. Clara crawled more than climbed, fingers bleeding as they grasped at stone and sparse vegetation. At the top she collapsed, chest heaving, the world spinning around her. When her vision cleared, she saw it, a dark opening in the rocky face below, like a mouth in the mountainside, a cave. The descent was more controlled fall than climb, her body tumbling the final few yards, to land in a heap before the shadowed entrance. Cool air breathed from the darkness. Carrying the mineral scent of underground water, Clara dragged herself inside, away from the punishing sun. The temperature dropped immediately, raising goosebumps on her sunburned skin. She crawled deeper until darkness enveloped her completely. Her searching hands found damp stone, and then, miracle, a small pool formed by water dripping from the ceiling. Clara lowered her face to it and drank in small, desperate sips, remembering her mother's warnings about drinking too quickly when parched. The water revived her enough to explore her sanctuary. The cave extended further than she'd first thought, opening into a chamber tall enough to stand in. Weak light filtered from small fissures in the ceiling, casting ghostly illumination on stone walls streaked with mineral deposits. Clara gathered fallen branches from near the entrance, arranged them into a crude bed in the driest corner. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but water had given her hope. Tomorrow, she would search for food. Tonight, she would rest. As darkness fell outside, the cave's inner chamber grew pitch black. Clara huddled on her branch bed, listening to the steady drip of water and the occasional rustle that suggested small creatures shared her refuge. Fear of the unknown competed with bone-deep exhaustion until sleep finally claimed her. She woke disoriented, unsure how long she'd slept. The wound on her arm throbbed, heat radiating from it in alarming waves. When Clara touched it, her fingers came away sticky with fresh blood and something worse, yellowish fluid that spoke of infection. "Not now," she whispered, panic rising. "Please, not now." She tore another strip from her already tattered petticoat, soaked it in the pool, and bound the wound tightly. The cool water provided momentary relief, but fever soon followed, painting the world in surreal colors. Time lost meaning as Clara drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. She imagined her mother sitting beside her, stroking her hair, singing the lullabies of her childhood. The small cross became her anchor to reality as hallucinations threatened to sweep her away. "Stay with me, Clara girl," her mother's voice seemed to whisper. "You've always been stronger than you know." "I'm scared, Mama," Clara answered aloud, her voice echoing strangely in the cave. "Of course you are," the voice that wasn't really there replied. "Being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and continuing anyway." Clara's fingers tightened around the cross as she slipped deeper into delirium. In her fever dreams, the cave became a living entity, sometimes threatening to swallow her, sometimes cradling her like a child. Stone walls breathed in rhythm with her labored breaths. Water drops fell like tears. When lucidity briefly returned, Clara realized with distant horror that she'd lost track of days. Had it been 2 nights in the cave? 3? Her strength ebbed with each passing hour. The small pool sustained her, but without food or medicine. She was fighting a losing battle. On what she later believed was the 4th day, Clara heard something new, not water dripping or small creatures scurrying, but the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the cave entrance. Human footsteps. With the last of her strength, she pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding painfully in her chest. The wooden cross dug into her palm as she clutched it like a talisman. A shadow appeared at the entrance, tall and broad-shouldered. Not her father. This silhouette was different, crowned with what looked like feathers. The figure paused, then slowly stepped inside. Clara held her breath and waited for whatever fate had finally found her. The ceremonial knife moved through the deer's hide with practiced precision. Running Wolf worked in silence, the blade's carved bone handle worn smooth by years of use, his father's final gift before the raid that took him. Morning light filtered through pine branches, casting dappled shadows across his weathered hands as he dressed the young buck he'd taken down at dawn. He'd tracked the animal for hours, moving as his Apache grandfather had taught him, like wind through grass, present but unseen. The clean kill had been swift, respectful. A prayer of thanks, spoken in his mother's tongue, acknowledged the life given to sustain his own. Running Wolf stood, surveying the mountains that had been his true home for 10 winters. Distant smoke from white settlements hung in the valley below, a boundary he rarely crossed. The solitude suited him. A man caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. His mother's people, the Chiricahua, had tolerated his presence after his white father died, but never embraced him. The child with pale eyes was different, suspect. When drought came and game grew scarce, whispers spread that the mixed blood brought bad medicine. By 13 summers, he understood he would never truly be one of them. The white world proved no more welcoming. 3 brutal years in their mission school had taught him the cruelty behind their talk of salvation. They'd cut his hair, beaten Apache words from his mouth, called him savage while acting with savagery themselves. Running Wolf cleaned his knife on a handful of grass, then resheathed it at his belt. The familiar weight against his hip was one of few constants in a life defined by solitude. He hoisted the dressed deer onto his shoulders and began the walk back to his cabin, mentally cataloguing the meat that would fill his smokehouse for the coming weeks. The first sign something was wrong came halfway home. Tracks crossed his usual path, small prints made by worn boots, staggering in an irregular pattern. Running Wolf crouched, laying his kill aside to study the impression. A white person moving without skill or purpose. Injured, perhaps, or lost. Most whites kept to established trails, traveling in groups with horses and wagons. These tracks belonged to someone alone, desperate, someone who didn't know these mountains held dangers beyond getting lost. Running Wolf straightened, eyes narrowing as he scanned the landscape. The sensible choice was clear. Return to his cabin, ignore the intruder who would likely stumble back to their own kind or die trying. The mountains had a way of sorting such matters without his intervention, yet something about the track's erratic pattern nagged at him. The person was suffering. That much was clear from the way the steps dragged, occasionally showing marks where knees had hit ground. With a sigh that held years of conflict, Running Wolf secured his deer high in a tree, safe from scavengers until his return, and began following the stranger's trail. He moved cautiously, aware that even wounded whites could be dangerous when frightened. His hand rested on his knife's handle, ready. The tracks led upward, toward a ridgeline dotted with shallow caves. Running Wolf knew them well, places he sometimes sheltered during hunting trips. The trail grew more desperate as it climbed, showing places where the person had crawled rather than walked. At the base of the ridge, he found a scrap of fabric caught on a thorny bush, once white, now stained with dirt and what looked like blood. The tracks descended haphazardly down the other side, heading directly toward the largest cave. Running Wolf paused, listening. The mountain offered its usual sounds: wind through pine needles, distant hawk's cry, small creatures moving in undergrowth. Nothing to suggest human presence, yet those tracks led clearly into darkness ahead. Instinct told him to walk away. 10 years of solitary life had taught him the value of avoiding entanglements, particularly with whites. Their problems brought only trouble. Their gratitude was fleeting. Their memories short when it came to debts owed to those they considered beneath them. He had taken 3 steps back toward his suspended deer when a sound stopped him, faint but unmistakable. A moan of pain echoed from the cave mouth, followed by delirious murmuring in English. Running Wolf closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tightening. The sound carried memories he'd rather forget. Children crying in mission school dormitories, his mother's final breaths as fever took her, his own stifled sobs after the first whipping for speaking his native tongue. Pain was pain, regardless of who felt it. With reluctant resolution, he moved toward the cave entrance. Shadows concealed whoever waited inside, but the smell of infection reached him immediately. Someone was dying in there. Running Wolf stood at the threshold, allowing his eyes to adjust to the dimness. As the darkness resolved into shapes, he saw her, a young white woman pressed against the far wall, clutching something in her fist, eyes wide with terror and fever. The knife at his belt suddenly felt heavier. 10 years of careful isolation balanced against one moment of choice. Running Wolf took a deep breath and stepped inside. The clay water bowl had traveled with Running Wolf for nearly a decade, its surface worn smooth by countless hands before his. Now it sat between them like a bridge across an uncrossable chasm, the first gesture of kindness in a language neither fully understood. Running Wolf remained at the cave entrance, making no move to approach the frightened woman. Her condition was worse than he'd expected. Fever radiated from her pale skin in waves he could feel from several paces away. The crude bandage on her arm had slipped, revealing an angry red wound seeping with infection. "Shyla," he said softly in Apache, then remembered himself and switched to the little English he still possessed. "No hurt." The woman pressed herself further against the wall, eyes wild with fear and delirium. "Stay back," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "Please." Running Wolf recognized the universal language of terror. He'd seen it in cornered animals, in children at the mission school, in his own reflection years ago. He crouched slowly, placing his hands palm up on his knees, a posture his grandfather had taught him for approaching wounded deer. "Water," he said, pointing to the small pool, then to his own mouth. "You need." The woman's eyes darted between his face and the knife at his belt. Running Wolf understood her concern and slowly removed the weapon, placing it on the ground behind him. The loss of his father's blade left him feeling vulnerable, but he needed her trust more than protection. He retrieved the clay bowl from his pack, dipped it in the cave's pool, and set it on the ground between them. Then he backed away, giving her space to decide. For long moments, nothing happened. The woman stared at the bowl, conflict clear on her fever-flushed face. Thirst warred with fear, need with caution. Running Wolf waited patiently, keeping his posture open and unthreatening. Finally, desperation won. She lunged forward, snatching the bowl and retreating to her corner in a single movement. Water sloshed over the rim as trembling hands raised it to cracked lips. She drank with the desperate gratitude of someone who expects each swallow might be their last. When the bowl was empty, she lowered it, eyes clearer despite her obvious weakness. "Thank you," she whispered. Running Wolf nodded once, understanding the words, if not the emotions behind them. He pointed to her wounded arm. "Bad. Need medicine." The woman's free hand covered the injury protectively. "I know," she admitted, swaying slightly where she sat. "It's infected." Running Wolf saw her strength fading. Whatever reserve had kept her alert was rapidly depleting. He needed to act quickly if she was to survive another night. He gestured toward the cave entrance, then to himself. "I go. Come back. Bring—" He searched for the English word, finding only fragments from mission school lessons. "Plants! Help wound!" Panic flashed across her face. "Don't—" she started, then seemed to reconsider. What choice did she have? Will you really come back?" The question held a history of betrayal that Running Wolf recognized intimately. He nodded firmly, tapping his chest. "Come back. Promise." As if to emphasize his intent, he left his knife where he'd placed it, backing toward the entrance. "Rest," he instructed, making a sleeping gesture. "Wait." The woman clutched something small and wooden around her neck, some white man's medicine, perhaps. She nodded almost imperceptibly, exhaustion claiming her as she slumped against the wall. Outside, Running Wolf moved quickly. The deer would need to wait. This was more urgent. He gathered yarrow for infection, willow bark for fever, and prickly pear pads for their cooling properties. At his cabin, he collected clean cloths and jerky, adding them to his pack. Throughout these preparations, a voice in his mind questioned his actions. Why risk helping this white woman? What could come of it but trouble? Yet another voice, one that sounded like his Apache grandmother, reminded him that compassion wasn't meant to be selective. The sun hung low when Running Wolf returned to the cave, arms full of supplies. He called softly before entering, not wanting to startle her. No response came. Inside, he found her unconscious, breathing shallow and rapid, her skin burning hotter than before. Setting his pack down, Running Wolf knelt beside her. The bowl sat empty where she'd left it. He refilled it, then gently lifted her head, helping water past her lips, even in unconsciousness. She swallowed reflexively, a good sign amid many bad ones. Working methodically, he cleaned the infected wound with yarrow-infused water. The cut was deep but clean-edged, made by a blade, not a fall. This was no accident. Someone had done this to her, someone she fled from. The realization stirred something protective in him that he hadn't felt in years. When the wound was cleaned and packed with healing plants, he wrapped it with fresh cloth. The woman stirred, eyes opening briefly to meet his. Recognition flickered there, along with surprise. She hadn't truly believed he would return. "Rest," Running Wolf said again, offering more water. "I stay." She drank, then whispered something he didn't catch before slipping back into fevered dreams. Running Wolf settled against the opposite wall, preparing for a long night. The clay bowl sat between them, no longer a boundary, but the first tentative connection across worlds that had always kept them apart. The rabbit pelt lay beside Clara when she awoke, soft and still carrying the warmth of Running Wolf's hands. Fever had broken sometime during the night, leaving her weak but lucid for the first time in days. She ran her fingers over the fur, marveling at its silky texture against her skin. Running Wolf sat cross-legged near the cave entrance, arranging something on a flat stone. Morning light outlined his profile, strong jaw, straight nose, hair falling in 2 braids past broad shoulders. He wasn't as frightening in daylight, though wariness still prickled at the back of Clara's neck. Men had never given her reason to trust them. He sensed her gaze and turned, dark eyes assessing. "Better," he said, not quite a question. Clara nodded, surprised to find it true. The fire in her arm had subsided to a dull ache. Fresh bandages wrapped the wound, smelling of unfamiliar herbs. "Thank you," she said, voice rusty from disuse, "for helping me." Running Wolf nodded once, then returned to his task. Clara realized he was preparing food. Roasted meat cut into small pieces, alongside purple berries she didn't recognize. Her stomach cramped painfully at the sight, reminding her how long it had been since she'd eaten. As if hearing her thoughts, Running Wolf brought the stone over, setting it between them. "Eat," he said. "Slow." Pride warred briefly with desperate hunger. Clara had been raised never to accept charity, to maintain dignity even in hardship. But such concerns seemed hollow now, after days of staring death in the face. She took a small piece of meat, forcing herself to chew thoroughly, despite the urge to devour everything at once. "What is it?" she asked between careful bites. Running Wolf touched his nose, made hopping motions with his fingers. "Rabbit." The meat was gamey but delicious, the berries tart and sweet. Clara ate until her shrunken stomach protested, then reluctantly stopped. Running Wolf seemed pleased, nodding approval at her restraint. More later, he assured her. "Too much now. Sick." Clara eased herself into a sitting position, noting the rabbit pelt had been placed strategically beneath her. The thoughtfulness of this gesture from a stranger, a man who owed her nothing, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away, embarrassed. "My name is Clara," she said, touching her chest. "Clara Matthews." He nodded, mirroring her gesture. "Running Wolf." The name suited him, she thought. Something about his measured movements reminded her of a wolf she'd once glimpsed at Forest's Edge. Watchful and deliberate, Running Wolf reached for her bandaged arm, raising eyebrows in question. Clara extended it hesitantly, wincing as he unwrapped the dressing. The angry redness had receded, though the cut remained ugly against her pale skin. "Good," he pronounced, applying fresh herbs from a small pouch. "No more fire blood. How did you know what to use?" Clara asked as he rewrapped her arm with practiced efficiency. Running Wolf touched various plants laid out beside him, searching for words. "Grandmother," he tapped his head, "'id teach." While he worked, Clara studied him covertly. His clothing blended both worlds, buckskin leggings and moccasins, paired with a worn cotton shirt that might once have belonged to a white man. A contradiction, like everything about this situation. When he finished with her arm, Running Wolf drew in the dirt between them, simple pictures showing a sun rising and setting 3 times. He pointed to Clara, then the drawings. "Sleep here 3 days," he explained. "Then move. Better place." Clara's heart quickened with alarm. "Move where?" Running Wolf must have noted her fear. He made calming gestures, pointing to himself, then beyond the cave. "My home. Warm, safe." He mimed eating and sleeping, then pointed to the cave floor and shook his head. Not good here. The prospect of leaving her stone sanctuary terrified Clara almost as much as the idea of being alone again. She had no strength to continue running, but following this man, kind though he'd been, meant placing her trust completely in a stranger's hands. Reading her hesitation, Running Wolf stood and moved to the cave entrance, giving her space. He pointed to the wound, then outside. "Need more medicine. Come back sunset." Before Clara could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the rabbit pelt beneath her fingers. She traced its edge, considering her options. In truth, she had none. Without Running Wolf's help, she wouldn't survive another week. Her father would eventually find her, or nature would finish what infection had started. Through the day, Clara practiced standing, each attempt lasting longer than the last. She ate small portions of the food Running Wolf had left, rationing it carefully. When she felt steady enough, she made her way to the pool and washed her face and hands. The cool water a luxury after days of fever. As promised, Running Wolf returned at sunset, carrying something wrapped in large leaves. The rich aroma made Clara's mouth water immediately. "Deer meat," he explained, unwrapping a portion of still warm venison. "And this." He opened another packet containing flat bread, mesquite bean. They ate in companionable silence, the unspoken question of trust hanging between them. When the meal was finished, Running Wolf drew in the dirt again, a simple map showing the cave. A winding path and what appeared to be a small structure. "Tomorrow," he said, looking at Clara with quiet intensity. "You choose. Stay or come." He tapped the drawing of the structure. Cabin, fire, food. Clara wrapped the rabbit pelt around her shoulders, its softness a reminder of unexpected kindness. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Running Wolf considered this, searching for words in a language not his own. Finally, he simply tapped his chest, then pointed to the stars just becoming visible at the cave entrance. "All walk under same sky," he said. "All need help sometimes." In the growing darkness, Clara clutched the pelt closer and made her decision. The cave wall had become their canvas, crude pictographs telling stories where words failed. Clara traced her finger over the chalky outline of a deer Running Wolf had drawn, then added a stick figure with a bow. He nodded approvingly, adding an arrow in flight between hunter and prey. A week had passed since Clara had accepted his offer to leave the cave. The journey to his cabin had proven too ambitious, her strength failing halfway, so they'd returned to wait longer. Each day since had settled into a rhythm of small victories, standing longer, walking further, eating more, and learning to communicate. "Tuji," Running Wolf said, pointing to the deer drawing. "Tuji," Clara repeated carefully, earning a rare smile from her stoic companion. She pointed to another drawing. "And this?" "By Sodi, elk." Clara practiced the Apache word, savoring the unfamiliar sounds on her tongue. For every word she learned in his language, Running Wolf seemed determined to reclaim one in English. His vocabulary was surprisingly extensive, though dormant from years of disuse. Words returned to him slowly, like water seeping back into a dried streambed. "How did you learn English so well?" Clara asked, adding a son to their wall story. Running Wolf's expression darkened. "Mission school. 3 years." His hand unconsciously touched a small scar at his temple. "They beat Apache words away, put English in empty space." Clara's stomach tightened at his matter-of-fact description of cruelty. "I'm sorry," she said inadequately. He shrugged. "Long time passed," he pointed to their drawings. "Better now." 2 languages, not just one. Their pictographs had evolved from simple nouns, deer, water, tree, to more complex concepts. Running Wolf drew 2 figures beside a fire, one clearly female with long hair, one male with braids. Then he added angry faces approaching from the side, carrying what looked like guns. "Why you here?" he asked, tapping the female figure. "Who hunts?" Clara stared at the drawings, heart racing. She'd known this question would come eventually. Picking up a piece of charcoal, she sketched a 3rd figure, a man with a bottle in one hand, a knife in the other. She drew him larger than the others, menacing. "My father," she said quietly. "He tried to kill me." Running Wolf studied her drawing, then nodded as if confirming a suspicion. He pointed to her bandaged arm. "He did this?" "Yes." The memory still brought a rush of fear. "He was drunk. Said I was just like my mother, that he should have done it years ago." Running Wolf's jaw tightened. He added to the drawing, the father figure now separated from the others by a jagged line. "Bad spirit," he said. "Alcohol makes men into monsters," Clara nodded. Unable to explain the complicated grief that accompanied her fear, mourning the father who'd once taught her to fish, to identify constellations before her mother's death turned him bitter and violent. Running Wolf seemed to sense her conflicted emotions. He added to their wall story, the female figure now standing tall, arms raised toward the sun. "Strong," he said, pointing to Clara. "Survivor." The simple affirmation brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. To cover the moment, she pointed to his English drawings, a series of words he practiced daily. "Running Wolf," she sounded out, as he had written it phonetically. "Is that what your name means?" He nodded, given when 12 summers. "Saw Wolf run across Mesa same day I completed first solo hunt." "It's a good name," Clara said. "Strong, your name?" he asked. "What meaning?" "Clara, I don't know. My mother chose it." She hesitated. "In Latin, I think it means clear or bright." Running Wolf considered this, then nodded approvingly. "Good clear eyes. See truth, something warm unfurled in Clara's chest at his words. She added to their drawing, the two figures now walking together toward a small structure that represented his cabin. Running Wolf watched, then reached for the charcoal. He added a third figure ahead of them on the path. "Who's that?" Clara asked. Running Wolf's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, not quite a smile, but close. "Gabby," he said, then found the English word. "Rabbit." He pointed to the rabbit pelt she still kept close. "For food tomorrow. I teach you snare. You'll teach me to catch rabbits?" Clara couldn't hide her surprise. Her father had always insisted such skills weren't for womenfolk. Running Wolf looked puzzled at her reaction. "Of course. How else you eat when alone?" The question wasn't unkind, merely practical, but it revealed the vast difference in their worldviews. In Running Wolf's eyes, teaching her to survive wasn't charitable. It was necessary, expected. "Tonjni," he said suddenly, pointing to a drawing of a stream they'd made earlier. Clara tried to repeat the word, but stumbled over the pronunciation. Tonjni, Running Wolf corrected, exaggerating the sounds. Clara tried again, mangling it worse. Unexpected laughter bubbled from Running Wolf's chest, a deep, rusty sound as if long unused. Clara found herself laughing too, the sound echoing strangely in the cave that had witnessed so much suffering. Their pictographs watched from the wall as something shifted between them. Fragile still, but growing stronger each day. Not quite friendship, but perhaps its beginning. Tomorrow, Clara thought, as their laughter faded to comfortable silence, they would try for the cabin again. And this time, she would make it. The faded photograph lay between them, its edges worn soft from years of handling. Clara had kept it hidden in a small pocket sewn inside her dress, protecting it through her flight, fever, and recovery. Now she watched Running Wolf study the image. A woman with Clara's eyes and gentle smile, standing beside a tall man whose face was partially torn away. "My mother," Clara said softly. "Ellen Matthews." They sat at the cave entrance, watching the sunset paint the landscape in fiery hues. Clara's strength had returned enough that Running Wolf deemed her ready for the journey to his cabin tomorrow. Tonight, he'd brought a special meal, venison seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify, wild onions roasted to sweetness, and a handful of early berries. Running Wolf handed the photograph back carefully, recognizing its value beyond the faded paper it was printed on. "She has kind eyes," he observed. Clara nodded, throat tight with emotion. She was kind. To everyone. Her fingers traced her mother's image. Even to my father, when he didn't deserve it. Running Wolf added another stick to their small fire. "When did she walk to the spirit world?" 3 winters ago. Viva took her in just 4 days. Clara's voice faltered. "My father was away trading. By the time he returned, she was already gone." Running Wolf nodded in understanding. Death's swiftness needed no translation between cultures. After that, everything changed, Clara continued. "He started drinking more. Working less. Sometimes he'd look at me and..." She shuddered. It was like he saw her ghost and hated it for haunting him. "Grief makes some men hard," Running Wolf observed. "Turns hearts to stone." Clara tucked the photograph away, the familiar ritual of protecting it offering small comfort. "Were your parents kind?" she asked, seeking safer ground in his past rather than her own. Running Wolf was silent so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of long-buried memories. "My father was white trader. John Wilson." The English name sounded strange in his mouth, like borrowed clothing that didn't quite fit. "Respected by Apache. He learned language, followed customs. My mother was daughter of medicine man. Their marriage brought peace between her people and settlers for many seasons." Clara listened, watching shadows play across his face, both from the fire and from within. "When I was 12, white men came to trading post. Said my father cheated them." Running Wolf's hand moved unconsciously to the knife at his belt. "They were drunk, angry. Shot him while I watched from hiding place." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. Running Wolf acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "After burial, my mother took me to her village. But her people," he searched for words. "They saw white man's son in my face. Bad luck, they said. When drought came, they blamed mixed-blood child. Clara's heart ached for the boy he had been. So you left? First to mission school. White men in black robes said they would civilize me. His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. 3 years there taught me white world no more welcoming than Apache village. So I chose mountains instead. They do not care about blood mixture. The simple dignity in his words moved Clara deeply. She reached impulsively for his hand, then hesitated. Such familiarity might not be welcome. Instead, she offered what she could, understanding. We're both orphans, then. Even if my father still lives, Running Wolf met her eyes. Sometimes family we choose stronger than family of birth. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully explore. Clara looked away first, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their conversation. You should rest, Running Wolf said, sensing her discomfort. Tomorrow's journey not easy. Clara nodded, moving back into the cave. She arranged her makeshift bedding, now considerably improved with the rabbit pelt and a blanket Running Wolf had brought. As she settled, a question that had lingered for days finally found voice. Running Wolf, why did you help me? You could have just walked away when you found me. He remained silhouetted against the dying light, considering her question with characteristic thoroughness. When I was boy, my grandmother told story of wolf and injured hawk, he finally said. Wolf found hawk with broken wing, could have eaten it. Instead, wolf brought food until hawk healed. Then both hunted valley together for many seasons. He turned to look at her. Grandmother said sometimes Great Spirit puts creatures in our path to remind us we are all connected. The answer satisfied something deep in Clara. It wasn't charity that motivated him, but something more profound, a worldview that saw connections where others saw divisions. She was nearly asleep when a nightmare jolted her awake, her father's face looming close, knife raised. A cry escaped before she could stop it. Running Wolf was beside her instantly, alert for danger. Just a dream, Clara gasped, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Running Wolf didn't dismiss her fear. Dreams sometimes carry warnings, he said seriously. Your father still searches. The question sent a chill through her. In the safety of the cave, with Running Wolf's steady presence, she'd almost forgotten the reason for her flight. I don't know, probably. Running Wolf moved to the cave entrance, a silhouette of vigilance against the night sky. Sleep, he said. I will watch. As Clara drifted back to sleep, the last thing she saw was his protective figure, a sentinel between her and the darkness that had driven her to this place. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt truly safe. The handmade moccasins fit Clara's feet perfectly, soft deerskin conforming to her shape as if made for her, which of course they had been. Running Wolf had worked on them during her recovery, measuring her torn boots when she slept and adapting a pair he'd originally crafted for winter. Better for walking, he explained, watching as she tested them. Silent on forest floor, Clara took a few experimental steps. The sensation was entirely new, like walking barefoot, but protected, connected to the earth in a way her heavy boots had never allowed. They're wonderful, she said, genuinely impressed. Today marked 2 weeks since their first meeting, and Clara's strength had returned enough for the journey to Running Wolf's cabin. More significantly, today would be her first venture beyond the immediate vicinity of the cave that had been both prison and sanctuary. Running Wolf had packed their few belongings efficiently, her rabbit pelt, his cooking tools, the blanket, and provisions for the journey. Clara felt a curious reluctance as she watched him prepare, an unexpected attachment to the stone walls that had witnessed her transformation from desperate fugitive to something she didn't yet have a name for. We'll leave at midday, Running Wolf said. Less distance today, rest at sunset, finish journey tomorrow. Clara nodded, hiding her apprehension. Though stronger, she harbored private doubts about her endurance for mountain travel. Before we go, Running Wolf continued, small walk to build strength. He gestured toward a nearby stream visible from the cave entrance. Water clear there. You can wash. The thought of fresh water against her skin, instead of the damp cloth baths she'd been limited to, was irresistible. Clara followed him outside, moccasins moving silently over the ground, just as he'd promised. The morning air felt crisp against her face, carrying scents her senses had forgotten: pine resin, wildflowers, distant rain. Clara stood for a moment, eyes closed, simply breathing. When she opened them, Running Wolf was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked. He seemed to consider his words carefully. 2 weeks in cave, yet you still notice beauty." He gestured at the landscape. "Many who suffer forget to see." The observation touched her unexpectedly. "My mother always said beauty was God's way of reminding us he's still there, even in hard times." Running Wolf nodded thoughtfully. "Apache say same, different words. Great Spirit speaks through beauty when other voices too loud to hear." They walked slowly toward the stream, Running Wolf slightly ahead, continuously scanning their surroundings with the alertness of prey and predator combined. He moved with remarkable silence, his footfalls virtually imperceptible even to Clara just behind him. "How do you walk so quietly?" she asked, trying to mimic his movements. Running Wolf paused, turning to observe her gait. "You walk heel first," he demonstrated. "Makes noise, sends shock through body." He showed her the correct technique, placing the ball of the foot down first, then gradually transferring weight. "Feel ground before trusting it with body weight." Clara practiced the new walking style, concentrating on each step until Running Wolf nodded with approval. "Better. Body remembers when mind forgets." At the stream, Clara marveled at the crystal water flowing over multicolored stones. Running Wolf moved a discreet distance away, giving her privacy while remaining within call. The cold water against her skin was shocking, but wonderful, as she washed her face, neck, and arms. She untied her tangled hair, attempting to comb it with her fingers. When she rejoined him, Running Wolf was kneeling beside a plant with feathery leaves. "Yucca root," he explained, digging carefully. "For washing hair, healing skin." He demonstrated crushing the root between stones, producing a foamy substance. Next time, as they continued their short walk, Running Wolf named plants and their uses, a natural pharmacy growing wild along their path. Clara listened intently, trying to memorize each one. "This heals stomach sickness," he said, pointing to a small flowering herb. "This stops bleeding, a moss-like growth on a tree. This brings down fever." Familiar yarrow that had healed her wound. Clara stopped to examine a striking red flower. "And this one?" "That one just beautiful," Running Wolf said with unexpected gentleness. "Not everything needs purpose beyond beauty." Something in his tone made Clara look up sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. Their path took them to a small rise overlooking the valley below. Clara caught her breath at the vista, mountains rolling toward the horizon, forests giving way to distant plains. The world suddenly seemed vast again, after weeks in the cave's confines. "It's magnificent," she whispered. Running Wolf nodded, scanning the landscape with more practical intent. He pointed toward a distant smudge of smoke. "Settlement there. One day's hard ride." Clara felt a flutter of alarm. "Will they come this way?" "Not usually." "Wrong direction for hunting, trading." He turned to her. "But good you asked. Always know where danger might come from." As they stood absorbing the view, Clara heard it, men's voices, distant but unmistakable, coming from the valley below. Running Wolf heard them too, his posture instantly alert. "Inside," he said tersely, taking her arm. "Now!" They hurried back to the cave, all concerns about Clara's endurance forgotten, as adrenaline propelled her forward. Inside, Running Wolf quickly obscured their tracks while Clara gathered their belongings. "Search party?" she asked, voice tight with fear. Running Wolf nodded grimly. "Men on horseback, moving along stream." The brief, beautiful interlude beyond the cave had shattered, reality intruding with cruel timing. Clara clutched her new moccasins, suddenly understanding their true value, not comfort but survival. "We leave tonight," Running Wolf decided. And the darkness, the wanted poster crackled in Running Wolf's hands, its bold black letters stark against yellowed paper. He had left Clara hidden in the cave at dawn. slipping away to scout the nearby settlement after the voices they'd heard yesterday. What he discovered sent him hurrying back, face grim with fresh concern. "Missing," the poster declared. "Clara Matthews, daughter of respected businessman Thomas Matthews. Believed taken by renegade Indian. 50 reward for information leading to her safe return. $100 for capture of Indian responsible." Clara stared at the paper, her father's lies rendered official in printer's ink. Beneath the text was a crude sketch of her face, recognizable despite the artist's limitations. Beside it, a generic drawing of a savage with feathered headdress bore no resemblance to Running Wolf, but would incite fear nonetheless. "He's calling me kidnapped," she whispered, hands trembling. "Making himself the victim." Running Wolf nodded grimly. "6 men with rifles in settlement. Your father leads them." The news hit Clara like physical blow. He was closer than she'd feared, personally leading the search rather than sending others. The determination confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't about finding a beloved daughter, but reclaiming control. Possession. Their expanding search area, Running Wolf continued. And moving this direction tomorrow. Clara's mind raced with terrible possibilities. If caught, would anyone believe her over her father? Would Running Wolf be shot on sight, assumed guilty by blood and ancestry alone? The wanted poster answered these questions clearly enough. "We need to leave now." Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. Running Wolf agreed. "Gather only what we need. Travel light, travel fast." As they packed hurriedly, Clara's thoughts churned with guilt. She had brought this danger to Running Wolf's doorstep, a man who'd shown nothing but kindness since finding her half dead in this cave. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "This is my trouble, not yours. Maybe I should know." Running Wolf cut her off with unexpected sharpness. "Going alone means death, either from mountains or your father. But they'll kill you if they find you with me," Clara argued. "The poster makes it clear they're looking for an Indian to blame." Running Wolf's expression hardened. "Not first time white men hunt me. Won't be last." He checked his knife, then the small hunting bow he carried. "We go deeper into Apache territory. They won't follow there. And then what?" Clara pressed. "My cabin first. Resupply." His face softened slightly at her obvious distress. "Then decide." Clara folded the wanted poster carefully, tucking it into her dress pocket alongside her mother's photograph. Evidence of her father's treachery, should she ever need it. Running Wolf outlined their route using charcoal on the cave wall, a crude map showing mountains, rivers, and the location of his cabin 2 days' journey northeast. They would travel only at dawn and dusk, hiding during daylight and full darkness when search parties were most active. "What about tracks?" Clara asked, thinking practically now that the initial shock had passed. "Won't they follow our trail?" Running Wolf allowed the slightest smile. "They are town men, read signs in books, not on earth." Nevertheless, he showed her how they would walk on stone when possible, through water when necessary, leaving minimal trace of their passage. By midday they were ready. Clara took a final look around the cave that had been her sanctuary. The pictographs remained on the walls, their shared language, the beginning of understanding between worlds. She touched them briefly, a farewell to this strange chapter of her life. "Something wrong?" Running Wolf asked, watching her. Clara shook her head. "Just remembering. I was dying when I found this place. Dying again when you found me here." She met his eyes directly. "It's strange to feel grateful for the worst days of your life." Running Wolf seemed to understand. He nodded toward the cave entrance. "Path appears when needed. Not before." They slipped out in the dim light of late afternoon, keeping to shadow and underbrush. Running Wolf led the way, moving with the silent confidence of one who had survived by remaining unseen. Clara followed in his footsteps exactly as he'd taught her, placing each foot with deliberate care. They had covered less than a mile when Running Wolf suddenly froze, raising one hand in warning. Clara stopped instantly, barely breathing. Through the trees ahead, voices carried on the wind, men complaining about terrain, horses' hooves on stone, metal clinking against saddles. Running Wolf pulled Clara down behind a fallen tree. his body partially shielding hers as a search party passed less than 30 yards away. Through gaps in the foliage, Clara glimpsed familiar faces, men from Copper Creek, rifles balanced across saddles, expressions bored and irritated. Then she saw him. Her father rode at the group's center, spine rigid, eyes constantly scanning the landscape. The silver flask gleamed at his hip, catching afternoon light. Even at this distance, Clara could see the coldness in his face, not concern for a missing daughter, but determination to reclaim what he considered his property. One of the men pointed toward the hills where the cave lay hidden. "Could be up there, Matthews. Good hiding spot," her father's response carried clearly. "We'll burn out every cave and hollow if we have to. That savage won't keep what's mine." The casual cruelty in his voice confirmed every fear that had driven Clara's flight. Running Wolf's hand found hers in the dirt, a silent reassurance as they remained motionless until the search party passed. When the voices finally faded, Running Wolf helped Clara to her feet. "They follow wrong trail," he whispered. "But we must move quickly now." As they resumed their careful journey, the wanted poster crinkled in Clara's pocket with each step, a paper reminder of the lies pursuing them through these mountains. More dangerous than any wild predator they might encounter, the eagle feather rested in Clara's palm, its barred pattern catching the moonlight as Running Wolf secured it to a thin leather cord. "Protection," he explained, tying it carefully around her wrist. "Eagle sees far, warns of danger. Apache warriors carry feather for safe journey." They had left the cave under cover of darkness. Traveling by starlight through terrain Clara would have found impossible to navigate alone. Running Wolf moved with quiet confidence, pausing occasionally to ensure she kept pace. The eagle feather had been produced from his small medicine pouch just before their departure, a talisman against the dangers ahead. "Thank you," Clara whispered, oddly moved by the gesture. The feather felt light against her skin, but somehow significant. A tangible connection to beliefs she didn't fully understand, but increasingly respected. They traveled until the eastern sky began to lighten, then took shelter in a dense thicket of juniper. Running Wolf constructed a small blind that concealed them while allowing observation of the surrounding area. Clara marveled at how quickly the shelter appeared. Branches and foliage arranged to look natural while providing protection from both elements and searching eyes. "Rest," Running Wolf instructed, offering jerky and a small waterskin. "I watch first." Clara's muscles ached from unaccustomed exertion, but pride kept her from complaining. She chewed the tough dried meat slowly, conserving water with tiny sips. Running Wolf had positioned himself at the edge of their shelter, as still as the rocks around them, only his eyes moving as they scanned the landscape. "You should rest too," Clara ventured after a while. Running Wolf shook his head slightly. Later, men search most actively at dawn. As if confirming his words, distant voices carried on the morning breeze. Clara tensed, hand instinctively covering the eagle feather. Running Wolf made a small gesture for silence, though she hadn't spoken. The voices grew closer, a search party working its way along the valley floor beneath their hiding place. Clara held her breath as figures came into view, recognizing her father's distinctive black hat among them. The men moved slowly, checking crevices and overhangs, their frustration evident even at a distance. One man pointed up the slope in their direction. Clara's heart hammered so loudly she feared it might give them away. Running Wolf remained utterly motionless, not even appearing to breathe as the search party debated whether to climb higher. Finally, her father's voice carried clearly. "Waste of time. They'd be fools to travel this ridge. We'll check the eastern passes." The men turned their horses, continuing along the valley floor until they disappeared around a bend. Clara released her breath slowly. "That was close." Running Wolf nodded once. "Too close. We change route." He sketched a rough map in the dirt, indicating their original path and a new one that would take them higher into the mountains before circling back toward his cabin. Longer, safer. They remained in hiding through the heat of the day. Clara drifted in and out of light sleep, always waking to find Running Wolf vigilant. When she insisted on taking watch, he finally relented, showing her specific movements to look for and what bird calls might indicate approaching humans. If danger comes, he instructed, don't wait. Run that direction. He pointed northeast. Follow stream to Stone Ridge. I will find you. The calm certainty in his voice reassured her. You won't have to. I'm not running away again. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or respect. He nodded once, then settled beside her, back against a boulder. Within moments, his breathing deepened into sleep, though Clara suspected he remained partially alert, even in rest. They resumed travel at dusk, moving steadily through increasingly rugged terrain. Running Wolf set a challenging pace, but Clara was determined not to slow them down. Her moccasins moved silently over pine needles and stone, the walking technique he'd taught her becoming more natural with practice. As night deepened, the temperature dropped sharply. Clara pulled her rabbit pelt closer, grateful for its warmth. Running Wolf noticed her shivering and paused to retrieve something from his pack, a small container of bear fat mixed with herbs. For cold, he explained, showing her how to apply it to exposed skin. The grease was odorless and created an immediate barrier against the mountain chill. By midnight, they reached a small clearing where Running Wolf determined they could safely rest. He built a tiny fire in a rock depression, carefully shielded to prevent its light from being visible beyond their immediate vicinity. The minimal warmth was welcome as they shared the last of their food. Tomorrow we cross river, Running Wolf said, pointing ahead to where the land sloped downward. Marks boundary of Apache hunting grounds. Few white men go beyond. Will your people be there? Clara asked, suddenly anxious at the prospect of encountering others. Not my people anymore. He poked at the fire with a stick. Cabin 2 days beyond river. No settlements between. Clara watched the flames in his dark eyes. I'm sorry, she said softly. He shrugged. Choice made long ago. They sat in silence until Running Wolf doused the flames. In darkness, they spread their bedding on opposite sides of the stones. Clara lay awake, listening to the night. Just before sleep claimed her, she whispered, thank you. For everything. After a pause came his answer, you walk strong. Need less thanks, more credit. The words warmed her more than fire. She touched the eagle feather at her wrist, oddly protected despite danger still near. Tomorrow they would cross the river into wild country, away from everything familiar. Yet for the first time since fleeing her father's cabin, Clara felt something new. Hope. The cabin stood tucked between pine slopes, sturdier than Clara expected, logs chinked with clay, a stone fireplace, even glass in 2 windows. Inside everything was orderly, shelves of food, furs folded with precision. She touched a smooth windowsill. You built this yourself? 3 winters. Apache methods, white man's tools, Running Wolf said. Smokehouse outside. Garden for summer. Stream close by. She noticed a buffalo hide beside English books, baskets next to metal pots, signs of both worlds. It's wonderful. He gave a small nod, pride flickering in his eyes. He explained the roof's slope, the cellar's coolness. Then he pointed. Your place. Mine there. The boundary was clear. Clara set down her few things. I should contribute. Need food, he replied. At the stream she gathered wild greens while he checked traps. By evening, Clara cooked with unfamiliar plants while he cleaned rabbits. They ate in companionable quiet. Afterward, he led her into the cellar, showing where food was kept. She noticed small carved figures. What are these? She asked, then saw his stillness. Back above ground, his voice was firm. Sacred things should not be moved. Flushing, Clara said quickly, I'm sorry. He looked at her steadily. When I was boy at mission school, white teachers took sacred pouch, threw in fire, called it devil's work. Your question different. Ignorance, not cruelty, she nodded. Then teach me, so I don't offend again. Tomorrow, he said. Now rest. That night, shadows on log walls kept her awake. She had escaped one prison only to find herself in another of uncertainty. What was she to him? A guest, a burden? Across the room he murmured in Apache, reminding her of all she didn't know. His cabin was sanctuary. Her presence unsettled it. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would find ways to belong without disturbing his balance. The space between their mats was more than physical. It was the unspoken question of what they were becoming. Later, as autumn neared, Clara worked quietly with wool yarn she'd found in his stores. Running Wolf's surprised approval at her request to use it had encouraged her. The blanket grew stitch by stitch, her own small claim of usefulness in this fragile new life. "My mother taught me," Clara explained when Running Wolf showed interest in her technique. "Before I was old enough for schooling, I'd sit beside her chair and watch her needles move like magic." Nearly 2 months had passed since their arrival at the cabin. The search parties had eventually withdrawn from the mountains, though Running Wolf still exercised caution during his infrequent trading journeys. Clara remained close to the cabin, learning the rhythms of this new life with increasing confidence. The cooling air brought new urgencies. "Winter comes early to high country," Running Wolf warned, as they gathered firewood, stacking it meticulously along the cabin's exterior wall. "Snow can last until spring thaw. Must prepare now." Clara embraced these lessons eagerly, determined to contribute rather than merely consume resources. She learned to preserve berries, dry meat for storage, and tan hides under Running Wolf's patient instruction. The boundaries that had initially divided the cabin gradually softened, their living spaces becoming less rigidly defined as they worked together toward common survival. "What is this stitch called?" Running Wolf asked one evening, watching Clara's needles click steadily. "Basket weave," she answered, holding up the blanket's growing edge. "See how it makes a pattern like woven reeds? My mother said it's the warmest because it traps more air between the yarn." Running Wolf nodded appreciatively. "Apache women weave similar patterns in baskets. Different materials, same thinking." These moments of cultural connection had become more frequent, each discovering parallels between their different upbringings. Running Wolf showed Clara how his people predicted weather from animal behavior. She shared her mother's method for treating winter coughs with honey and herbs. The exchange felt equal, respectful, neither assuming superiority. Outside, leaves turned gold and crimson, then fell in crackling carpets across the forest floor. The air carried a sharp edge that hinted at snow, though the sky remained clear. Clara worked faster on the blanket, sensing the approaching cold in a way she'd never noticed in town. Will it be finished before first snowfall? Running Wolf asked as he entered the cabin one evening, arms laden with newly split wood. Clara held up the nearly completed project. "Just the border remains." "Another day or two," he nodded, his usual reserve softened by evident anticipation. The blanket had become a quiet focus for both of them, her first significant contribution to their shared home beyond daily tasks. That night, as flames cast dancing shadows through the cabin, Running Wolf shared Apache winter stories, tales of Old Woman Frost who brought the snow, of how coyotes stole fire to warm the people. Clara listened, captivated by the rhythm of his voice and the vivid imagery. "Your people have beautiful stories," she said when he finished. "My mother told Bible stories mostly, though sometimes fairy tales from her own childhood in England." "Tell one," Running Wolf requested. Settling more comfortably against the wall, Clara hesitated. Then began the story of Ruth and Naomi, women from different tribes who chose to remain family despite hardship. As she spoke, she realized why this particular tale had come to mind, with its themes of loyalty across cultural boundaries. When she finished, Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. "Good story," he finally said, "about choosing family beyond blood." The following morning brought the season's first snowfall, delicate flakes that melted upon touching the ground but signaled winter's imminent arrival. Clara completed the blanket's border as white began accumulating on pine branches visible through the window. That evening she presented the finished blanket to Running Wolf, suddenly shy. "For you." "For winter." He accepted it with uncharacteristic reverence, fingers tracing the intricate pattern. "Very fine work," he said, voice holding genuine admiration. "Will be warmest in cabin." "That's the idea," Clara said, pleased by his reaction. You've given me shelter, food, protection. This is small repayment. Running Wolf shook his head slightly. Not payment, gift. The distinction seemed important to him. Different meaning, Clara understood. Payments discharge debts, ending obligations. Gifts strengthened connections, acknowledging bonds that continued. Later, as the snowfall intensified, Running Wolf disappeared briefly outside, returning with something wrapped carefully in soft leather. "For you," he said, presenting a beautifully carved wooden hair comb. "From deer antler. For winter evenings." Clara accepted it with wonder, admiring the polished surface and intricate design of intertwined leaves. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." The exchange of gifts marked a subtle shift in their relationship, acknowledgement of something evolving beyond mere necessity into genuine choice. That night, the first true snow blanketed the world outside their windows, transforming familiar landscape into something magical and new. The temperature plummeted, wind moaning around the cabin corners, but inside remained warm and secure. Clara sat by firelight, using her new comb to untangle her hair, while Running Wolf read from one of his precious books, Robinson Crusoe, a story of survival on distant shores. The hand-knitted blanket lay across his lap, its basket-weave pattern catching the firelight. "Will we be trapped here when snow deepens?" Clara asked. Thinking of the isolation ahead, Running Wolf looked up from his book. "Not trapped, protected." He gestured toward the window where snow fell in silent abundance. "Winter gives gift of quiet. Time for stories, for making things, for thinking." The perspective shifted something in Clara's understanding. What might have seemed imprisonment now appeared as opportunity, for learning, for reflection, for the kind of peace she'd never known in her father's chaotic home. As if reading her thoughts, Running Wolf added, "Time also for deciding." "Deciding what?" Clara asked, though something in his tone suggested she already knew. He met her eyes directly. "What comes after winter? Where you wish to be when pass is open?" The question hung between them, inevitable yet previously unvoiced. Clara's hands stilled on her hair as she considered what he was really asking. Was this arrangement temporary shelter from danger, or the beginning of something more permanent? "I haven't thought about leaving," she admitted softly. Running Wolf nodded, neither encouraging nor discouraging, simply acknowledging her words. Winter gives time for such thoughts. Outside, snow continued falling, each flake unique, yet part of the blanket transforming the world. Inside, comfortable silence settled between them as the fire crackled and night deepened around their small sanctuary. The dried wildflowers lay pressed between pages of Running Wolf's worn Bible, preserved from the moment that had changed everything. Clara touched them gently, these fragile purple blooms that had witnessed what neither she nor Running Wolf had yet found words to discuss. Winter had settled fully upon the mountains, transforming their world into a realm of white silence, broken only by the crack of frost-split trees and occasional call of hunting birds. Despite heavy snowfall, Running Wolf still checked his trap lines every few days, teaching Clara to identify animal tracks and predict weather changes. "Good day for hunting," he announced one clear morning, the sun glinting blindingly off pristine snow. "Deer will feed at southern clearing." Meat running low, Clara had grown accustomed to his absences, but today she asked, "Could I come with you? I should learn hunting too." Surprise flickered across Running Wolf's face, followed by consideration. "Trail difficult. Deep snow." "I'm stronger now," Clara said, thinking of how far she'd come from the half-dead woman he'd found in the cave months ago. "And I'm tired of cabin walls." Running Wolf studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Dress warmly. Listen carefully to instructions." They set out as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, snowshoes strapped to their boots. Clara had practiced with the ungainly contraptions near the cabin, but found them more challenging on actual trails. Running Wolf moved ahead, breaking path through deeper drifts, occasionally turning to check her progress. "You do well," he acknowledged when they paused to rest. "Natural balance." Clara accepted the compliment with quiet pride. Such moments of approval had become increasingly meaningful to her, not because she sought his validation, but because she valued his honest assessment. They continued upward through thinning forest until reaching the overlook Running Wolf had described. Below, a sheltered meadow showed signs of deer activity, areas where animals had poured through snow to reach frozen grass beneath. They settled into a natural blind formed by wind-fallen pines. "Now we wait," Running Wolf whispered. "Patience is hunter's strongest weapon." Clara nodded, content to observe the winter landscape stretching before them. The vastness stirred something in her soul, a sense of perspective that made her former life seem impossibly confined. Here, beneath an endless sky, she felt simultaneously insignificant and profoundly connected to something larger than herself. Running Wolf noticed her expression. "You see it," he said softly. "The big quiet. Is that what your people call it?" she asked. "My grandfather's words. He said mountains hold wisdom in their silence. If people remember how to listen, they fell quiet then, sharing the stillness." After nearly an hour, Running Wolf's slight tensing alerted Clara. Following his gaze, she spotted movement at the meadow's edge, a young buck emerging cautiously from forest cover. With practiced efficiency, Running Wolf readied his bow, signaling Clara to remain perfectly still. The deer ventured further into the clearing, unaware of their presence. Running Wolf drew back the bowstring, his exhaled breath forming a small cloud in the frigid air. The arrow found its mark with deadly precision. The buck dropped instantly, the clean kill Running Wolf always prioritized. He lowered his bow, murmuring what Clara now recognized as a prayer of thanks in Apache. "Good hunting," she said when he finished. Running Wolf nodded, already planning the butchering process. "Will be heavy carry back. Snow makes work harder." They made their way down to the fallen deer, Running Wolf explaining how to preserve every usable part: meat, hide, sinew, bone. As he demonstrated proper cutting techniques, Clara noticed dark clouds building rapidly over the western peaks. "Storm coming," she observed, remembering his weather lessons. Running Wolf glanced up, his expression immediately alert. "Bad one." Moving fast, he surveyed their situation quickly, calculating. "Too far from cabin. Need shelter nearby." They worked rapidly, harvesting essential portions of the deer and securing the remainder high in a tree away from predators. By the time they finished, wind had risen significantly, driving fine snow into exposed skin like tiny needles. "There's cave system below Eastern Ridge," Running Wolf decided, shouldering their pack of meat. "Can wait out storm there." The journey to the caves proved treacherous, visibility deteriorating with each passing minute. Wind howled between rock formations, creating disorienting eddies of snow. Clara followed closely, fighting growing anxiety as the familiar landscape transformed into a bewildering white void. When Running Wolf disappeared suddenly from view, Clara's heart lurched painfully. She rushed forward to discover a drop-off where snow had concealed the edge of a frozen stream. Running Wolf had fallen through weakened ice, already struggling in waist-deep freezing water. "Stay back," he shouted as she approached. "Ice breaking," but Clara could see his strength fading rapidly as cold water sapped his body heat. Without hesitation, she lay flat, distributing her weight across the ice surface and extended her walking staff toward him. "Grab hold," she called against the wind. Running Wolf seized the staff with numbing fingers. Clara braced herself, using every ounce of strength to pull him towards solid ground. For terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, agonizingly, he began moving forward, breaking ice before him until reaching thicker edge. With final desperate effort, Clara helped him clear the stream. Running Wolf collapsed on snowy ground, violent shivers racking his body. Clara recognized the immediate danger. Wet clothing in these temperatures meant death without swift intervention. "The caves," she urged, helping him rise. "We have to keep moving." Running Wolf nodded, unable to speak through chattering teeth. Leaning heavily on Clara, he indicated direction with shaking hand. They struggled forward through intensifying storm until dark mouth of cave appeared before them, sanctuary from howling wind. Inside, Clara worked with desperate efficiency, stripping Running Wolf's frozen clothing and wrapping him in their single emergency blanket. She gathered what minimal dry wood could be found near the entrance, using flint from his pack to spark precious fire. As small flames caught, Clara assessed their situation grimly. Running Wolf's shivering had grown more violent, a good sign his body still fought, but his skin remained frighteningly cold. Without additional heat, hypothermia would claim him before the storm passed. She knew what must be done. Without hesitation, Clara removed her own clothing, keeping only minimal undergarments. Slipping beneath the blanket, she pressed against Running Wolf. Sharing body heat the way he had once taught her for wilderness survival. "See, Clara," he managed through chattering teeth. Confusion evident. "Hush," she said firmly. "Body heat. You're teaching." Gradually, impossibly, warmth began returning. The violent shivering subsided to occasional tremors. Running Wolf's breathing steadied, his body relaxing incrementally against hers. Outside, the storm raged unabated, but within their shelter, life-giving warmth slowly prevailed. Dawn arrived with storms passing. Clara woke to find Running Wolf watching her, fever replaced by something deeper in his gaze. A small purple wildflower, improbably blooming in the cave's protected entrance, had been tucked gently behind her ear while she slept. "You saved my life," he said simply. Clara touched the flower, suddenly aware of their proximity, of boundaries crossed that could never be restored. "You would have done the same." Running Wolf's hand rose slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, then touched her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Not same," he said softly. "Different now." The moment expanded between them, question and answer in the same breath. Clara closed the remaining distance, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that transformed everything that had come before into mere prologue. When they finally parted, Running Wolf's expression held wonder and uncertainty in equal measure. "This path difficult," he cautioned. "Your world, my world, neither accept easily." Clara touched the wildflower again, its improbable survival in winter's heart suddenly symbolic. "Maybe we make our own world," she suggested. "Neither yours nor mine. Something new." His smile then, rare and transformative, was answer enough. The traded silver coin caught the spring sunlight, passing from Running Wolf's palm to the trader's weathered hand. Jenkins was one of few white men Running Wolf still conducted business with, a gruff, practical man who asked few questions and valued quality furs above gossip. "Need more ammunition," Running Wolf explained, laying out his requests on the flat rock that served as their trading counter. "Coffee, salt, thread for sewing." Jenkins nodded, assessing the pile of pelts Running Wolf had brought. "Good beaver this season. Throw in them 2 fox hides, and I'll add sugar and that knife you've been eyeing." They settled on terms quickly, both men preferring efficiency to haggling. As Jenkins packed the goods, casual words shattered the peace of recent months. "Heard there's still folks looking for that Matthews girl," Jenkins mentioned, not looking up. Her pa increased the reward again. 200 now for her or information. Running Wolf kept his expression neutral, despite the jolt of alarm. "Long time to search for runaway daughter." Jenkins shrugged. "Man's obsessed, way I hear it. Drowns himself in whiskey, then rages about Indians stealing his property." He glanced up, eyes suddenly shrewd beneath bushy brows. "Funny thing, description matches a woman I glimpsed near your cabin last month when I was tracking that mountain lion." The air between them changed instantly, charged with unspoken threat. Running Wolf's hand drifted toward his knife, stopping when Jenkins made a placating gesture. "Ain't my business who you keep company with," the trader continued. "Just thought you should know folks are still looking. Might want to be more careful about who sees her." Running Wolf completed the transaction in silence, mind racing with implications. Jenkins had known for weeks, yet said nothing until now. The warning could be genuine, or prelude to betrayal for reward money that would sustain a trader through lean years. "Appreciate the word," Running Wolf said finally, gathering his supplies. Jenkins nodded, pocketing the silver coin. One more thing. Heard talk in town about organizing another search party come full spring. This time with Apache trackers from Fort Benton. The final detail confirmed Running Wolf's fears. No Apache would voluntarily track for whites unless heavily paid or coerced. Jenkins couldn't know such specific plans through normal trading channels. He'd been to town recently, perhaps spoken to Matthews himself. Safe travels, Jenkins called as Running Wolf departed. The farewell carrying ominous undertones. The journey back to the cabin took longer than usual as Running Wolf repeatedly doubled back, checking for signs of pursuit or observation. By the time he arrived, late afternoon shadows stretched across the clearing where Clara tended their small garden plot. Spring's first shoots emerging from recently thawed soil. She straightened at his approach, smile fading as she registered his expression. They had grown attuned to each other's moods during winter's intimate confinement, developing a language beyond words. "What happened?" she asked as he set down his pack inside. Running Wolf related the encounter without softening details. Since their first kiss months ago, honesty had become foundation of their deepening bond. Clara deserved unvarnished truth, not false comfort. Jenkins knows, he concluded. Question is whether he's already betrayed us or merely warning of possibility. Clara sank onto a chair, face pale but composed. $200 is a fortune out here. Few men would resist that temptation. We should prepare to leave, Running Wolf said. I know places deeper in mountains. Old Apache shelters where white men never go. Clara nodded, already mentally cataloguing essentials they would need. The practical response reflected how far she'd come from the frightened woman he'd found in the cave. Nearly a year in wilderness had transformed her, building strength upon the resilience that had first led her to flee. As they packed supplies, a sound froze them both, distant but unmistakable crack of a rifle shot, followed by male voices carrying through trees. Running Wolf moved to the window, scanning tree lines with practiced eye. At least 6 men, he reported tensely. Armed, on horseback, Clara joined him, hand finding his. How did they find us so quickly? The answer was obvious. Jenkins hadn't been warning them. He'd already struck his bargain before their meeting. The silver coin had been mere bonus to reward money likely already promised. They approached from south, Running Wolf said, mind calculating options. Still time to escape north, toward Apache territory. Clara gathered their most crucial supplies, while Running Wolf retrieved weapons, his bow, knife, and the old rifle he seldom used. Outside, voices grew closer, horses' hooves clear on the rocky path leading to their clearing. I should go to them, Clara said suddenly. Explain I wasn't kidnapped. Maybe they'll listen. Running Wolf shook his head firmly. Your father leads them. Already tried to kill you once. Men with him won't believe woman over respected businessman. Clara knew he was right. The wanted poster's lies had become accepted truth after a year of repetition. Any chance for justice through official channels had vanished long ago. Running Wolf outlined their escape route, a hidden trail leading to high country still partly snow-covered. From there, they could reach an old hunting cabin used by his grandfather's generation. Not comfortable, but defensible and unknown to white settlers. And if they catch us before we reach it? Clara asked. Running Wolf checked his rifle's loading with grim determination. Then I ensure you have chance to escape alone. No. The single word carried absolute conviction. I won't leave you to face them alone. Not after everything. Their eyes met in silent communication, mutual understanding flowing between them. Together or not at all, the decision required no discussion. Take only what you can carry Running Wolf instructed. Northern path through Pine Grove, then along streambed to hide tracks. As they prepared to slip away through the cabin's rear window, Clara cast one last glance at the home they had shared. The hand-knitted blanket, still draped across a chair, dried herbs hanging from rafters, the 2 sleeping mats that had gradually migrated closer together through winter's progression. This isn't fair, she whispered. Running Wolf touched her cheek gently. Life rarely is, but we are still living it, together. The silver coin that had sealed their betrayal would be forgotten by Jenkins within weeks, spent on whiskey or supplies. But the consequences of that simple transaction were only beginning to unfold as Clara and Running Wolf slipped into forest shadows, pursued by men whose greed and prejudice threatened everything they had built together. The broken pocket watch lay in the dirt, its crystal shattered, hands frozen at 10:17. Thomas Matthews stared at it with momentary confusion, then dismissed it as unimportant compared to the cabin before him, the place his daughter had supposedly been held against her will. "Search it," he ordered the 5 men who accompanied him. "Find anything that proves she was here." The militia members, local men drawn by promise of reward, moved cautiously toward the structure. One, a blacksmith named Hollister, noted fresh tracks leading away from the rear. "Someone left in a hurry. 2 people heading north." Matthew's face darkened. "Then we follow. She can't have gone willingly. Must be under his control somehow." Inside, the militia found evidence contradicting this narrative. A woman's handwriting in a journal, carefully arranged living space with obvious feminine touches. 2 sleeping areas gradually converged into one. Most telling was a crude drawing pinned near the hearth, 2 figures hand in hand beside a cabin, names written beneath in different styles: Clara and Running Wolf. "Mr. Matthews," Hollister called hesitantly, holding the drawing. "You sure your daughter didn't just run off?" "This looks like she's been corrupted," Matthews snapped, snatching the paper and crumpling it. "That savage has turned her mind with heathen practices. All the more reason to find her quickly." The youngest militiaman, barely 20 and new to the territory, exchanged uncomfortable glances with Hollister. Neither voiced their growing doubts as Matthews urged them back to pursuit. The tracks led them through dense pine forest, occasionally disappearing where the fugitives had used streams or rocky ground to obscure their path. Matthews grew increasingly agitated with each delay, swinging between maudlin reminiscence about his precious daughter and venomous promises about the Indians' fate. By late afternoon, they had gained ground, the trail fresher. Running Wolf and Clara had maintained good pace, but couldn't match mounted pursuers indefinitely. As shadows lengthened, Matthews ordered the men to spread out, covering all potential escape routes through a narrow canyon ahead. "Remember," he reminded them, checking his rifle, "shoot the Indian on sight if necessary, but Clara must not be harmed. She's confused, not responsible for her actions." The men took positions, hemming in the canyon's exit. Matthews advanced alone, calling out with false concern, "Clara, Clara, it's your father! I've come to take you home." Hidden behind a fallen tree near the canyon's mouth, Clara and Running Wolf exchanged glances. They had hoped to reach the high country before being overtaken, but exhaustion had slowed them. Now trapped in the narrowing passage, options dwindled to a final stand. "We could still try climbing out," Clara whispered, indicating the steep canyon walls. Running Wolf shook his head. "Too exposed. They'd have clear shots." He surveyed their position critically. "I'll draw their fire. When they focus on me, run through that gap." He pointed to a narrow opening between rock formations. "Absolutely not," Clara hissed. "We agreed, together or not at all." Before they could argue further, Matthew's voice came again, closer. "I know you're here, Clara. That savage can't protect you anymore." Clara felt something snap inside, the last thread of fear that had kept her silent. She stood suddenly, ignoring Running Wolf's attempt to pull her back. "I'm here, father," she called clearly, "and I left you of my own free will." Matthews appeared around a bend in the canyon, rifle lowered momentarily in surprise. Behind him, militia members moved into position, weapons trained on the area. "Clara," Matthews exhaled, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. "Thank God. Come here now, we're taking you home." Clara remained where she stood, Running Wolf a shadow behind her. "I am home," she answered steadily. "The home I chose, with the man I chose." Matthew's expression hardened. "You're confused, girl. He's addled your mind with, 'He saved my life,'" Clara interrupted, voice rising. "After you tried to end it with that knife. Or have you told your friends that part of the story?" Murmurs rippled through the militia. Hollister stepped forward slightly. What's she talking about, Matthews? Lies, Matthews spat. Indian lies fed to her until she believed them. Clara pushed up her sleeve, revealing the long scar on her forearm. This lie? The night you came at me drunk, said I looked too much like Mother and deserved the same fate. The youngest militiaman lowered his rifle slightly. Mr. Matthews, she's defending a savage who stole her, Matthews growled, but uncertainty had entered his voice. You've all seen the posters. Read the reports. Reports you wrote, Clara countered. Just like you wrote Mother's death offers fever when everyone in town suspected otherwise. A dangerous silence fell. Several militia members exchanged glances, pieces falling into place. Matthew's violent reputation, his wife's suspicious death, his daughter's sudden disappearance. Enough, Matthews snarled, raising his rifle. Step away from him, Clara. Final warning. Running Wolf moved beside Clara, one hand touching hers briefly. Your choice, he said quietly. Always your choice. Clara met her father's gaze unflinchingly. I'm not coming back, ever. The daughter you knew died in that cave last year. The woman I am now was born there too. Then you'll die with your savage, Matthews hissed, finger tightening on the trigger. Several things happened at once. Hollister shouted, Wait! As he moved toward Matthews. Running Wolf pushed Clara sideways as the rifle discharged. A second shot cracked from the ridge above. One of the militia members firing at what he thought was Running Wolf, reaching for a weapon. The bullet meant for Clara went wide, striking a militiaman who had moved forward to intervene. The man cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell. Matthews stared in shock at the unintended victim, momentarily frozen. Running Wolf seized the opportunity, drawing his knife while keeping Clara behind him. Enough blood, he said firmly. Let her speak her truth. Then decide. Matthews seemed not to hear, eyes fixed on his broken pocket watch, now lying in the dust where it had fallen from his coat, a wedding gift from his wife, its hands forever marking the moment violence had replaced reason. She looks just like Ellen, he whispered, something breaking in his voice. Every day a ghost staring back at me, so you tried to make me a ghost too? Clara asked, stepping forward despite Running Wolf's protective gesture. Mother would be ashamed of what you've become. The words struck like physical blows. Matthews seemed to deflate, aging years in moments, as the facade of righteous father crumbled. Behind him, militia members attended to their wounded companion, anger rising at how Matthews' obsession had led to one of their own being shot. You're coming back with us. Matthews, Hollister said firmly, taking the man's rifle. Sheriff needs to hear about all this. Matthews barely seemed to register the words, eyes fixed on Clara with something between grief and revelation. You really left on your own? I ran for my life, Clara answered simply, and found it out here with him. As the militia secured Matthews, the broken watch remained in the dirt, its shattered face reflecting the final moments of his control over the daughter who had finally, completely slipped beyond his reach. The sheriff's badge caught afternoon light as Sheriff Daniel Porter turned it thoughtfully between his fingers. He'd ridden out personally after hearing gunfire echo through the canyons, arriving to find a situation far different from the kidnapping rescue he'd been led to expect. So you're telling me, he said slowly, addressing Clara where she sat on a fallen log, Running Wolf standing protectively nearby, that you fled of your own accord after your father attempted to kill you. Clara nodded, displaying the scar on her arm. This was from blocking his knife. There are witnesses in town who saw me running that night, bleeding. Porter's weathered face remained neutral, though his eyes reflected decades of separating truth from lies. He'd known Thomas Matthews for years, a harsh man grown harder after his wife's death, prone to whiskey and quick anger. The story Clara told aligned with observations he'd privately made, but never acted upon. And you, he asked Running Wolf, found her hiding in a cave? Running Wolf nodded once. Dying, infected wound, no food. Helped her heal. Helped her. Matthews spat from where he sat guarded by two militia members, wrists bound with leather straps. He corrupted her, living together unmarried like animals. Porter silenced him with a raised hand. You'll have your say before the judge, Matthews. For now, I'm gathering facts. The wounded militiaman had been stabilized, the bullet removed from his shoulder by Running Wolf with unexpected skill. This act of assistance had shifted perceptions further. Several militia members now openly questioning Matthews' version of events. "Miss Matthews," Porter continued, "these are serious accusations against your father. Would you be willing to provide formal testimony in Copper Creek?" Clara hesitated, eyes darting to Running Wolf. Return to town, the place she'd fled in terror a year ago, where her father's influence ran deep. Yet without her testimony, he might escape proper justice for his crimes. "I'll testify," she said finally. "But I won't stay in town afterward." Porter nodded, understanding the implicit question about her future. "Territory law is clear enough. You're of age to choose your own path." His gaze shifted briefly to Running Wolf, though some paths raise more eyebrows than others. The uncomfortable reality hung between them. A white woman choosing life with an Apache man violated society's strictest taboos. Even sympathetic townsfolk would struggle to accept such a union. Would there be legal consequences? Clara asked directly. "For either of us?" Porter sighed, turning his badge over again. "No formal law against it, but I won't pretend it would be easy." He lowered his voice, a rare gesture of personal rather than official advice. "Territories are changing. New settlements appearing monthly. Might be places less concerned with who people choose to love." As afternoon faded toward evening, arrangements were made. Matthews would be taken back to Copper Creek to face charges. Clara would follow separately with Porter to provide testimony, then decide her next steps. "What about him?" Hollister asked, nodding toward Running Wolf. Porter considered this carefully. "Mr. Wolf is not accused of any crime. Miss Matthews has clearly stated she left voluntarily and was in fact rescued, not kidnapped." He met Running Wolf's eyes directly. "You're free to go wherever you choose." A meaningful glance passed between Clara and Running Wolf, unspoken understanding that wherever one went, the other would follow. As the group prepared to depart, Porter approached Clara privately, pressing something into her hand. "Take this," he said quietly. Clara looked down at the sheriff's badge now resting in her palm. "I don't understand." "Insurance," Porter explained. "If you need help, send word with this. Proves the message comes from you." He glanced toward Matthews, being helped onto his horse despite his bonds. "Some men don't accept losing what they consider theirs, even from behind bars." Clara closed her fingers around the badge, touched by the unexpected alliance. "Thank you." Porter nodded once, then returned to his official demeanor as he organized the journey back to town. That night, camped halfway to Copper Creek, Clara sat apart from the main group, watching stars emerge above pine silhouettes. Running Wolf joined her silently, his presence a comfort after the day's turmoil. "Are you certain about testifying?" he asked. "Town brings dangers," Clara nodded, determination clear in her profile. "For my mother as much as myself. Her death deserves truth even this late." Running Wolf accepted this with understanding. They had discussed her suspicions about her mother's convenient fever during their long winter conversations. Some justices transcended personal safety. After, Clara continued, fingering the sheriff's badge in her pocket, Porter mentioned a women's aid society in Tucson. "Said they help women start new lives. You wish to go there?" Running Wolf asked, voice carefully neutral despite the subtle tension in his shoulders. Clara turned to face him fully. "I wish to know all possibilities before deciding our path." She emphasized the word "our" deliberately. "The society might offer options we haven't considered, places where we could both belong." Running Wolf gazed into the darkness beyond their small camp. "I've lived between worlds always, never fully accepted by either." His hand found hers. "But I have never regretted taking you from that cave, nor I coming with you," Clara replied softly. The sheriff's badge pressed against her fingers, symbol of conventional authority, yet offered now as protection for an unconventional choice. Tomorrow would bring Clara face to face with her past in Copper Creek. Justice for her mother and herself would provide closure to one chapter of her life. But what came next remained unwritten. The mountain wilderness had been their sanctuary, their classroom, their courtship ground. Could they find such acceptance elsewhere? Or would they need to create it themselves, carving space between worlds as Running Wolf had done with his cabin? As if sensing her thoughts, Running Wolf spoke again. "Where you go, I follow. Where I go, you follow. This is Apache way when hearts are bound." Clara leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Then whatever comes after testimony, we face together." Beyond the camp, Matthews sat in sleepless isolation, staring at nothing. The father who had tried to control her through violence was now himself contained, his power diminished, but not his potential threat. Clara touched the badge in her pocket, grateful for Porter's unexpected alliance. Tomorrow would bring confrontation with ghosts of her past. The day after would demand choices about her future. But tonight, under vast star-scattered sky, Clara allowed herself simply to exist in the present moment, beside the man whose discovery of a dying girl in a mountain cave had altered both their destinies. The wedding blanket draped across their shoulders as they stood at the edge of the mesa, its intricate pattern telling a story no written language could fully capture. Half was traditional Apache design, sacred symbols of mountains, eagles, and flowing water woven in earth tones. The other half featured Clara's contribution, roses, crosses, and stars rendered in brighter threads that complemented rather than overwhelmed their counterparts. 1 month had passed since Thomas Matthews' trial. His confession, wrung from him when faced with multiple witnesses, and Clara's steady testimony had shocked even those who'd long harbored suspicions about him. Not only had he attempted to kill Clara, but Ellen Matthews' fever had been aided by gradual doses of rat poison administered by her husband. The judge had sentenced him to hang, justice finally reaching crimes long hidden behind closed doors. In the aftermath, Clara had found unexpected allies. Sheriff Porter offered ongoing protection from those who disapproved of her choices. The Women's Aid Society in Tucson provided options, but imposed no decisions. Most surprisingly, several townspeople stepped forward with their own stories of Matthews' cruelties. Long tolerated out of fear or misplaced respect, Clara traced the blanket's pattern with her fingertips, remembering the Apache women who had helped create it. Running Wolf's estranged cousin had been first to extend welcome, bringing others gradually into their circle. Not universal acceptance, many still maintained distance, but enough connections to form tenuous bridge between worlds. No regrets? Running Wolf asked, watching distant clouds build over the valley that cradled their new beginning. Clara shook her head. None. Their decision had crystallized during quiet conversation after the trial. Neither town nor deep wilderness would offer the life they sought. Instead, they chose the borderland, literal and figurative space between worlds. The modest trading post they established sat at the edge of Apache territory, and 3 days' ride from Copper Creek, far enough for safety, close enough for necessary commerce. The strategic location served travelers, settlers, and native peoples alike, providing neutral ground for exchange beyond mere goods. Riders coming, Running Wolf noted, nodding toward dust rising along the northern trail. Clara saw them too, an Apache family group bringing crafts to trade for supplies. Their initial wariness had gradually softened as the trading post developed reputation for fair dealing and respect. Should prepare the blue beads, Clara said. Morning Star mentioned wanting them for her daughter's coming-of-age ceremony. They walked back toward their home, hand in hand. The wedding blanket still draped across their shoulders, despite the warm spring afternoon. The structure reflected their shared vision, larger and more refined than Running Wolf's mountain cabin, yet incorporating its best elements. Logs and adobe created walls that stayed cool in summer and warm in winter. Large windows invited light from all directions. A spacious porch welcomed visitors from any background to rest before continuing their journeys. Inside, Clara arranged trade goods, while Running Wolf prepared coffee for their approaching guests. Their movements around each other had developed seamless choreography, passing items without needing to ask. anticipating the other's needs with unconscious ease. Letter came yesterday, Clara mentioned, setting out the coveted blue beads. From Porter. Says the Hollister family might stop here next week on their way to California. Running Wolf nodded thoughtfully. The blacksmith who spoke for you at trial. He wants to thank us in person, Clara explained. And his wife hopes we might have medicine for their youngest child's cough. Such requests had become increasingly common. Clara's knowledge of traditional European remedies, combined with Running Wolf's Apache medicine wisdom, had created healing practice sought by diverse clientele. What began as necessity, treating injuries and illnesses far from doctors, had evolved into respected vocation that transcended cultural boundaries. When the Apache family arrived, Clara greeted them in their language, while Running Wolf offered traditional welcome gestures. The subtle approval in the elder grandmothers. Eyes acknowledged their efforts to honor both heritages, rather than choosing one over the other. Trading proceeded with customary deliberation, each item considered for true value rather than rushed exchange. Children explored the collection of carved animals Running Wolf created during quiet evenings. The youngest, a girl barely walking, toddled determinedly toward Clara, offering a wildflower clutched in chubby fingers. "Ahehe," Clara thanked her, using the Apache word with practiced ease. As their visitors eventually continued their journey, Clara and Running Wolf stood in the doorway watching them depart. The trading post's shadow stretched long across the yard, promising cool evening after day's heat. "Your mother would be proud," Running Wolf said unexpectedly. "Woman of courage raises daughter with same spirit." Clara leaned against him, emotion tightening her throat. "Your parents too, I think." They crossed boundaries when few dared. The observation held truth, neither needed to elaborate. Their parents' stories, both tragic endings and brave beginnings, had shaped the path that led them here, to this unlikely junction between worlds. Later, as sunset painted the landscape in amber and gold, they walked to the small garden behind their home. Vegetables grew in orderly rows, alongside medicinal herbs from both traditions. At the garden's center stood young fruit trees, apple, plum, and cherry saplings, not native to this territory, but coaxed into thriving through persistent care. "Like us," Clara had said when planting them, "a growing where we weren't expected to belong." Now she knelt beside new growth, checking moisture around the saplings. Running Wolf adjusted stones that marked the garden's boundary, adding one carried from his original mountain cabin, physical connection to their beginning. As darkness settled, they returned to the porch. Stars emerged above, while coyotes called from distant ridges. Running Wolf wrapped the wedding blanket around them both as temperature dropped. Its woven symbols, bridging traditions that world insisted must remain separate. "We should visit the cave," Clara suggested suddenly. When spring flowers peak, Running Wolf understood immediately. The cave that had first sheltered her, where he had found her dying, where their story began, it deserved acknowledgement in their continuing journey. "Good place for remembering," he agreed. "How fear becomes courage. How ending becomes beginning." Clara smiled, leaning into his embrace. The trading post's lantern cast golden light across the porch, a beacon for travelers navigating darkness between known territories. Like the wedding blanket around their shoulders, their lives had become intricate weaving of separate traditions into something entirely new, neither fully Apache nor fully white, but authentically, uniquely theirs. "Two trails becoming one," Running Wolf murmured, echoing words from their ceremony months earlier. Clara completed the thought, fingers interlaced with his. "One path created by walking it together."